You'll see us. Good afternoon. I'm Lynn Skolnick, and I'm here today as with former colleague Marvin Rappaport. We were both former members of the Board of Trustees of the Ethelbert B. Crawford Public Library in Monticello, and we are in the process of a local history project. And as part of that project, we have an oral history as well. And we're attempting to interview those folks who have lived and played and worked or were educated in Sullivan County, and particularly in the library service area, which includes the towns of Thompson, Bethel, and Forestburg. Our guest today is a woman who has spent many years in the county, was born here, came back here, and worked and played here. And I would like to introduce Joyce Salimeno. Welcome, Joyce.
Thank
Hello.
you. It's great to be here.
Oh, great. Joyce, I'm going to ask you first if you would tell our audience, when did your family first come to the county, and a little something about them, and then about your involvement in the county?
Well, my mother was born and raised in Lake Huntington on a farm, and my father was born and raised in Hortonville. So I don't know when their ancestors came to Sullivan County, but I know that my mother's parents originally came from Ireland, and my father's parents from Germany. So it had to be many, many years ago. And I was born in the old Callicoon Hospital in 1941. And that's pretty much it. And I love Sullivan County. I've loved living here as many years as I have.
And what did your folks do, Joyce, in the county?
Well, my mother actually, after high school, was a telephone operator in Lake Huntington, and she helped my grandmother raise her siblings. My father worked for Montgomery Ward. He was a troubleshooter in management. So when I came along, I was really raised almost like an Army brat, because he was transferred so often. And we lived in Middletown for a while, Oneida, New York, Rome, New York, Baltimore, Maryland, Hartford, Connecticut, and then in the Albany, Latham area for a very long time. So it was really kind of fun. I'm an only child, but my mother made it very easy for me to do all of that traveling. She just, when Pop would come home and say, well, we're moving next week, okay, that was it. So I thought nothing of it.
And for those of our audience, the Montgomery Ward was a very large national store, and sold, there was a large catalog that people looked forward to. And I remember when I first came to Monticello, there was a Montgomery Ward catalog store on Lower Broadway.
Yes, I remember that too. Well, Montgomery Ward and Sears were competitors. And of course, the catalogs were always called the wish books. Everybody waited for them every year, and they were huge.
I do remember that. So what are your earliest memories, Joyce, of living here in Sullivan County?
Well, I think no matter where we were living at the time, because of my father's occupation, we would always come back to visit my grandmother on the farm. And there was something about growing up on farmland that was very, very special. Riding the tractors. My father came back every year to help Grandma do the haying. And I think all of her sons-in-law did that. They just loved taking their vacation and coming back to hay. And it was it was a wonderful experience to grow up like that. My grandmother had a dairy farm. So she had the cows, and she had chickens, and she had pigs and everything else that went along with it. It was just so much fun.
So then your family but was in Middletown long enough for you to graduate from Middletown High School.
Yes.
What did you do after high school, Joyce?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story how we got to Middletown. My father started his career with Montgomery Ward in Middletown. And the last transfer that he had was to Baltimore, Maryland. And I was a 7th grader. And you'll appreciate this being a teacher. The school system then It's a long time ago, but the school system then was 2 full years behind New York. And they wanted to take me as a 7th grader and move me into 9th grade. My father said, not happening. So they made a decision. They were afraid to have me raised there because the pace was very fast in those days. And he resigned from Montgomery Ward, and they decided to move to Middletown because that's where he started. He still had a lot of contacts in Middletown, and that's how he ended up in Middletown High School. And then they decided that I should really spend all of my high school years in one place. And I think that was a smart decision. And I loved it. But you know what's funny? I still have many friends from moving around as much as we did. You know, people that I met in Rome, New York, people that I met in Latham and Albany, I'm still in touch with. And of course, Facebook now makes it easier.
So once you graduated from high school, what was your next step, Joyce?
Well, my next step.
What year was that, Joyce, by the way?
Pardon?
What year did you graduate, by the way?
1959.
Okay, thank you.
And I really wanted to study art, but it ended up not happening. And I went to work for an accounting firm. And really, it was from that point that I got involved in the insurance business because a close friend of my father, a man named Ray Benton, had an insurance agency. And actually, he was in the life insurance business. His mother had an insurance agency, and he was then going to start his own general insurance agency. So he said, I need some help. I need some help. I said, I'm working. I can't help you. And he said, oh, just do it for me on a part-time basis. Well, I knew nothing about the insurance business. And he taught me, and his love for that business was contagious. And I loved it too. So then when I moved to Monticello, I stayed with the accounting firm and I still helped Ray part-time. And I went to work for Walter Rulin. I was his administrative assistant for.
And Joyce, just tell our audience who Walter was.
Oh, Walter Rulin was the principal president of the Rulin Agency, which is a very large insurance agency. Unfortunately, no longer exists. But they then became Frontier Insurance Company. It was a huge operation, and I went to work for Walter. And in fact, that's when I got my CPCU designation. Now that at that time could be the analogy could be a CPA in accounting. That's how important it was in the industry. And when I received my designation in 1968, there were 6,000 CPCUs in the country, and only 3% of them were women, you know, because women were really not in business in those days. So this was a really big deal. Well, I got my designation, and then I wanted to do something more with my career. And, you know, Walter and I talked about it with his father, Max. And yeah, we were going to do something, and it just never happened. So a friend of mine, Julie Cohen, found out that there was an agency in South Fallsburg for sale, a smaller agency. And we talked about it, and I was ready to go. I thought that was a wonderful idea. So Julie and I ended up buying the Joseph Hillman Agency in South Fallsburg. And that's really how I got started as an agency owner.
And then once you bought that from Joseph Hillman, when did that company become Gersten Hillman?
Well, we actually bought the agency from Lyle Hillman, widow of Joe Hillman. And the interesting part of that agency was that it originally was started by Ben Newberg, who was the judge. And I guess when he was first elected county court judge, he was not permitted to be in that kind of business because of conflict of interest. So he sold it to Joe Hillman, and Joe Hillman passed away, and his widow Lila ended up with the agency. And she had a license and she knew the business, but she really didn't want to run the business. So we bought it. Lila stayed with us for a number of years. And then a few years later, we bought the Joseph Gersten Agency in Monticello. And then it became Gersten Hillman. And it became Gersten Hillman because G was before H. That was the only reason.
Well, that's a good reason. Easy to do.
Right.
Joyce, so both you and Lila, as women, were running an insurance agency.
That's right.
And so there were two women who were heavily involved in the insurance agent. Were there any other women who were running insurance companies at that time in this area?
At that time in this area, I don't believe so. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't believe there were. It was really an unusual thing. But I have to tell you that receiving my CPCU designation opened a lot of doors for me that wouldn't have ordinarily been opened. So I'm very grateful for that.
Do you remember ever encountering anybody refusing to do business with you in the early days because you were a woman, or with Lila at the time?
Well, Lila wasn't really involved only a couple of years after Joe passed away. But I do remember, I remember buying an agency in Middletown. In fact, it was the man's agency who gave me my start, Ray Benton. And after he passed away, we purchased his agency, and there was one insurance company that didn't want to appoint us for that reason. I'll always remember that. I mean, they didn't say it. They couldn't say it. Just like today, they wouldn't be able to say it. And they didn't say it then, but we all knew.
Very interesting.
Joyce, question. Who were the clients of the Hillmans and then Gersten Hillman agents? Who'd you deal with primarily? Was it the resorts, or were there other businesses in the county that you handle insurance for? And what kind of insurance did you handle?
Well, there were a lot of the resorts, yes, and I loved working with them. There were contractors. There were some of the school districts, some of the municipalities, but there was heavily the resorts.
Did you have any kind of a niche business? Some of the insurance agents, tend to insure certain groups from society, or were you just a general insurance agent?
We were a general insurance agent. In later years, there was one niche that we developed, but it wasn't the primary focus of the agency. Yeah.
Joyce, as the years went by and the resort industry was falling by the wayside, how did that affect your business?
Well, it affected the business, I think, in a couple of ways. First of all, a lot of the resorts closed, as we all know, but it became a personal loss, because in those days, your clients became your friends. And I don't think that occurs as much today as it did then. It was a small community, which I think we all recognize. It was wonderful being part of a small community, but you knew everybody, you knew their families, you were friends. And as the resort industry, the Borscht Belt, kind of faded away, you had to develop a new client base. And we all did. Unfortunately, you went out of the area, although you should go out of the area anyway. Nobody should be locked into one specific geographical area, I don't believe. But we went into Orange County, we went into other states, and you did that because you had no choice and you had to survive in your business. But that was interesting too.
Were you already invested in Orange County, having bought out the Benton agency?
Well, we were, but that was in the early 80s. So it was a while later. Okay. But we were invested and we expanded down there. We actually bought two agencies in Orange County, the Benton agency and then the Ritter agency. So we had those two bases in Middletown and in Orange County.
Joyce, do you remember your first time going to the library in Monticello?
Well, I don't know if it was the first time. I think everybody used the library, but I remember having meetings, and I think it was the Workforce Development Board, then the Private Industry Council, that met at the library several times. And it was fun.
So that leads me to another question, Joyce. How did you participate in the community in addition to the business ownership?
Well, I think I was involved in almost all the organizations, but I loved that. The hospital, which was Community General, and then Catskill Regional. Now it's part of the Garnet Health System. But I was very involved there. I was chairman of the board for 6 years. I joined after we affiliated with Orange Regional, I joined the Greater Hudson Valley Health System, which was the umbrella organization. I joined that board. And then I received a governor's appointment to the State Hospital Review and Planning Council, which I loved. But I think my passion was definitely the hospital and healthcare. It's so important. But I was chairman of the Workforce Development Board, the Monticello High School Academy of Finance, which was also so special. I was a founding member of Sullivan First. founding member of the partnership. I co-chaired the college dormitory committee, and this county received a REAP designation and grant money from Congressman Hinchy, and I co-chaired that board. And I was on the IDA, and I was involved in my insurance associations, the CPCU chapter and the Insurance Agents of Sullivan County chapter.
Joyce,
So I was
tell
pretty
us
involved.
what the IDA was.
Oh,
is.
Industrial Development Agency. It was really part of the county government, and it facilitated businesses that either wanted to come into the county or wanted to remain in the county and needed help to do so. It was really, there was a very small amount of grant money. I think everybody had the misconception that the IDA gave out all this money, which they really did. I don't know what they do now, but at the time that I was involved, they did not. It was really a tax abatement and mortgage tax abatement. It was really to help the business get started in the county or remain in the county and have some help in the early years. It was usually anywhere from 5 to 15 years at that time.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Where did you live during these years? And when did you become Joyce Salimeno?
Oh, okay. Well, I lived in Monticello early in an apartment. And then I lived in Coshocton for several years. And then I bought a house on Maston Lake in 1973, 50 years ago. Wow. And I've lived at Maston Lake ever since 1973. And I became Joyce Salimeno in 1977. I married a man named Pasquale Salimeno, and he was a retired military officer with the Marine Corps. And after he retired, he worked for the state of New York in correction. And he actually was my neighbor on Maston Lake. And we met then, and we got married, and I was married to him for 32 years until he passed away.
Wow.
Yeah.
Joyce, you
Tell us-
mentioned that one of the favorite things you did for the community was your service to Community General Hospital.
Yes.
Of all the other boards that you've been associated with over the years, did you have another one that always had a place in your heart that you still kind of look at as trying to foster what that organization did?
The Academy of Finance for the high school.
Yay!
It was just, that was so special. And in those early years, I remember, I think it was really designed to help the kids that would have fallen through the cracks.
Absolutely.
And every year when that recognition ceremony took place, and these kids would talk about their summer internships, there was no dry eye in the whole room because it was so emotional for these kids, and they connected. And that academy, I think, became a family for those students. It was just an amazing, amazing program.
Absolutely. That the Academy of Finance, by the way, is a national organization. Wendy Levinson had brought that to Monticello, and one of the things that it does is it provides students with a working relationship with somebody in the community. And coming from a smaller community, there was always a push and a pull to get enough companies that wanted to have an intern. But it certainly became one of the most meaningful things. And I think you're right, Joyce, about the fact that it was a family within the school that really supported and was an advocate for those young people. I'm glad to hear you say that. It's one of my favorites also. So how would you say, Joyce, that over the years, what is the greatest changes what is the greatest change that has taken place in the area?
Well, if I remember the early days in the 70s when I was first in my own business, even before that, Broadway in Monticello was just full of people all the time, day, night. In the summertime, it was more full of people. And those days have changed dramatically. And, it's sad, but everything changes. And I think that I don't know, it's still a beautiful area. It's still a beautiful area, and it's still home to me, and I love it. But the businesses have changed, and that's going to happen, and we all have to accept that. But when I think back to the days of the hotels, and I picture all of the people wandering around Broadway, and I remember all of the stores. You never thought of doing your holiday shopping anywhere but on Broadway and Monticello. There was one store after the other. No matter who you were buying for, you could find something. But there's a major change. There's no question.
Joyce, you had a window on Broadway, did you not? I mean, wasn't Kristen Hillman upstairs near the Rialto for a while? Weren't your offices on Broadway?
No, in fact, very interesting, because I left the Rulin agency to buy my own agency. And in 1973, when we bought the Gersten agency, we were a tenant of the Rulin agency. That was on the lower level of the Rulin building. Until we built our own building. Which
was across from the courthouse, for those who don't remember.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. And when did you build your own building, Joyce?
In 1977 on Anawanna Lake Road. And we had two tenants who were now still there, Gottlieb Engineering and Aileen Gunther's legislative office. And it's now Jeff Bank. And I'm so happy to see that. I'm happy that it's remained, because when I sold it to Jeff Bank, I had no idea what was going to happen. And it looks wonderful.
Yes, it does.
Yes.
So, Joyce, what do you see as you come back every summer after you've spent the winter in Florida? I guess the first question I'd ask is, why do you keep coming back?
I guess primarily because it's home. I still have some family in Sullivan County. I have a lot of friends in Sullivan County that are there all summer. In fact, a lot of my friends that I see often are snowbirds like me. They come to Florida for the winter, and then they come back to Sullivan County in the summer. And we have so much music. There's incredible music in Sullivan County. If you start following some of these musicians, you could be going every single night. And that's what I do all summer.
Yes, I noticed that, because anytime I go someplace, I know that Joyce will be there. So that leads me to my next question. In addition to music where you least expect it all over Sullivan County, what other things are going to continue to draw people to this area?
I think the nice country living. I think people love to be in an area where there's not one building on top of another. I see that here in Florida. I don't think there's a scrap of empty space anywhere. And we don't see that in Sullivan County. And as I drive around, the western part of the county is a really good example. It's still rural and not a lot of building, and you still see the farmland. And that's just so wonderful to see in today's day. You see the horses, you see the cows, you see the pigs, you see the chickens. I mean, they're just around, and it's really fun. It's very unspoiled there. And I think that's what I love. And I think other people agree with that. They come back every year.
And Joyce,
go ahead, Marvin.
We kind of jumped ahead in terms of, finishing school and all of that. Did you work? I don't know about college. I don't know if we talked about that, but did you work in any of the resorts growing up? And if so, tell us about that.
No, I didn't. I didn't go to college. I went to work right away in an accounting office, and I didn't work in any of the resorts. And I think maybe I would have, I don't know, if I graduated from Monticello. But in Middletown, it wasn't the next step. Even though I came back right away, it wasn't the next step for me, because I was already working for the accountants.
And when you came back from Middletown, you already had friends in Monticello?
I don't think I had a lot of friends, but I have my family. My parents were back here, and all my cousins in Lake Huntington. So it was, family was around. And then when I went to work for the Rulin agency, I ended up, meeting a lot of friends and making friends.
Could you give us a picture of what it was like at Rulin in the early days, or relatively early days? It was probably the 70s, as you say. It was late 60s, early 70s.
Yes, I think I started there in 1965. So that was a while back. And it was great. It was a family then. I'm trying to think how many people were employed there. I mean, for Monticello, Sullivan County, they were a huge employer. I don't know if they were the biggest or not. Probably the hospital was still the biggest then, but they were a very large employer, and people came to work there from all over. I remember as Walter's assistant, I was hiring people, and I interviewed this gal who was still my close friend from Milanville, Pennsylvania. And this was probably 1966 or 67. And she had gone to a secretarial school in, I believe, Scranton. She came to work. That was the first year that her family had indoor plumbing.
Whoa.
So
Wow.
people, yeah, I mean, I was just amazed and in awe of that. And her husband, when she married her husband, that he was raised on a farm. They had outhouses. They thought nothing of it. They just thought nothing of it. And it was so strange to be around someone that had grown up like that. I mean, not that none of us knew what an outhouse was, but I mean, to think in that day and age that she was actually still using an outhouse was pretty special.
And what did Rulin do? What kinds of insurance did Rulin do in those days?
Well, in those days, I think their two specialties were the camps and the horses. And I mean, they wrote other business. They wrote some of the hotels, but the camps and the horses were the big ones, the big niches.
And was that the horses were basically Peter's domain?
Peter
Rulin?
Stone, and the camps were Jesse's. Jesse Farrow. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And
it was great times. It was really fun times. And there was less. And when I say fun times, and I said that I think several times, I think that's because today's business pressure is so different than it was then. You were actually kind of allowed to have a good time in business. And I think it's changed so much where the pressures of everything just take away the fun part of it. And it shouldn't happen. There wasn't a day, I loved my business so much. And I don't think there was a day that I got up and hated going to work, ever. You had your aggravation, of course, you're going to, and you have your pressures now and then, but I still loved what I did. And I was blessed, for sure.
Joyce, do you think that feeling that you had was solely a result of this being a small community, or do you think that was a function of society at that time? Why do so many people not experience that joy going to work today?
I think it's the combination of the way business was in those days. I think the small community had a lot to do with it because, like I said before, you became friends with your clients and close friends with many clients. So you enjoyed seeing them, enjoyed interacting with them. But the world is full of pressure today. And I'm sure that has a lot to do with it in business. My son-in-law is in the insurance business. They have a niche market for insurance agents, errors, and omissions. But the pressure, as much as he loves it, and I know he loves it as much as I did, and I love talking to him about it. But I see with what he's dealing with, and the pressures are entirely different than they were in my day. Just society.
How so?
Well, just society. I think that in my day, if you needed a new company, it was easier to make those contacts. People would talk to you. Today, it's a whole bunch of bureaucracy to even get through to anyone that wants to talk to you. So it's harder to make those new contacts for new markets than it was when I was in the business.
Joyce,
Stress.
You mentioned the son-in-law, but didn't mention a daughter.
Oh, the daughter, Ricky. I married Melvin Gitlin, who was famous for owning the Down Under Disco in Monticello. He owned several bars in his lifetime. Nobby's, the Sackett Lake Lounge,
Nobbies.
Nobby's, Sackett Lake Lounge, and then the Down Under. And she's my stepdaughter, but she's my daughter, Ricky, Mel's daughter. So he had 2 children, Mark and Ricky. And I knew them back in the early 70s. And then we reconnected later on after Pat died. And I was with him until he passed away almost a year and a half ago.
But
Time goes march on.
you knew him from the early days.
I did. Yes.
Yeah.
And,
Also-
and Ricky's husband, Ira, also is a product of Monticello.
Yes, he is. But I guess he grew up in the city, I think in Brooklyn. And his parents were antique dealers. And they bought a house in Smallwood. And that's how Ira got to Sullivan County.
Right. Because I do remember him from the high school as well.
Yes.
And Ricky, yeah. And Mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of
And Mark
them.
did. All of them. Yeah.
So, Joyce, every year you keep coming back here. Do you spend longer and longer in Florida or about the same time?
Yeah, about the same time, but I still love being back in Sullivan County. I love Maston Lake. I love my home there. And as long as I'm in Florida for most of the hard winter in Sullivan County, I'm pretty happy. I'm probably here about 5 months in Florida.
And you mentioned earlier, Joyce, that one of the things that you love about this area now is the incredible music that you can go to venues, small and large, just about every night of the week. Do you have a musical background?
Not at all. I never played an instrument. I cannot carry a tune, but I love music. Just love it. And you know what? I love going to Callicoon, my birthplace. And there's music there constantly. And all the little places.
And Joyce, you appear to be someone who continues to keep in touch, whether you're here or in Florida, with your roots. And is that something that comes naturally to you? Do you work at that? Or do people just want to be around Joyce?
I don't know. I don't work at it. I just love to be around the people that mean something to me. So I always keep in touch. Yes.
And how long have you been retired now?
I retired in 2009. It seems like only a couple of years ago, but it's a little more than that.
And since that time, do you have any hand in your former business at all? Do you have a consultant at all?
I sold it to Marshall and Sterling, and they stayed in the Anawanna Lake building for maybe a year or two. And then they bought the old Stewart's building.
Yes.
And were there for a bit, and now that's been sold. And from what I understand, I got some messages that they have combined a number of their offices. So I think what they're finding is that in today's time, unlike years back, people do not walk into the insurance agencies. You know, everything is done by phone, by text, everything is electronic today. So I'm thinking that they really feel they don't need the presence in some of these smaller towns, and they're probably correct.
That's interesting. Sad a little bit for the smaller towns.
Yes,
but,
it's very.
But interesting. So that's another one of those changes that has certainly since 2020 that we've all observed.
Yes, definitely.
Joyce, over the years, what do you see as some of your favorite moments in Sullivan County? What are those events, or happy or sad, that have made a lasting impression on you?
Let me think. I don't know. I mean, there's sadness all over. You lose people that you love, people that you care about. But there are also so many happy events. I just went to the partnership annual meeting, and I remember being honored by the partnership, receiving the Walter Rulin Award, and how wonderful and special that was. And I'm so happy and gratified to see that it's still going on and people are still attending. It's a totally different crowd, of course. Every year it changes as new people come into the area, as people leave the area. But it's still great to see an organization like that continue to operate and continue to do the honors, which they should. It's a very important thing for the community, for the county.
And what about anything like any events at the hotels, Woodstock, the building of the hospital? What were some of those events that changed this area, good or bad?
Well, I certainly think that the building of the ambulatory services building at the hospital, I believe that was in 1977, made a big difference. It expanded services there. I know there are pros and cons about the affiliation with Orange Regional, but I know from the time that I was there, the independent hospitals really have a difficult time existing today. The reimbursements have always been an issue. And it shouldn't be a profit-making organization, but in some degree, you have to at least come close to breaking even in order to serve the community. And that could never happen. And the state was pushing us very, very hard to affiliate. And I see now, I hope and pray that it remains a service to the community. I've spoken to people recently that have had procedures done there, and they were very, very happy with the outcome and felt that they were treated right. And it's still a community hospital, in my view. And you're not a number when you go in there. People still know you. You still have your friends and family that work there. And that's really a good thing. And that also had to change. As sad as it was to not remain autonomous, there was no choice. It had to change. And of course, seeing the hotels, there were so many events. I mean, the partnership event probably would have been at one of the hotels back in the day. And I remember all the awards ceremonies were held at the different hotels. And of course, they're not here. And that's sad too. But they had no choice, I'm sure, as people's travel preferences changed. And the islands became more easily accessible and probably affordable.
Sure. Joyce, this is a question a little harder than some of them, I suppose. You told us that you never went to college, and yet you were able to be extremely successful in your chosen profession. You were able to own your own business. Were you surprised that happened to you? Do you think it's still possible for that to happen to other young women?
Yes. I did not go to college. And originally it wasn't by choice. My parents really didn't have any money, and that was okay. But I was very driven. And I really think that's what makes the difference. You have to be driven. You have to want to do something and be willing to work hard. And I worked hard. When we bought the Hillman Agency, there were a lot of things that, Lila, I love Lila to pieces. She's passed away, but, and she was wonderful to work with and be with, but she didn't have the insurance background. So there were many things that just didn't get done after Joe passed away. And I remember taking work home pretty much every night, working 7 days a week. But if you want to succeed and you are driven, that's what you have to do. And I almost don't think it matters if it was from a college degree or just, purchasing the agency like I did. If you really want it to work, you can make it happen. It's attitude. It's an attitude thing and a willingness to work hard. And that's what I did. And I remember for so many years taking work home early in the morning and late at night, but it was all worth it. Totally worth it. And I think too, you talk about the vocational education today. Look at the trades. I have so many friends that are in the trades. You can't find people to work. There's an opportunity for some of these young people that either don't want to go to college, can't afford to go to college, or are just not college material to get into a profession and really succeed. They can become business owners today.
I agree. So, Joyce, as we kind of wrap it up here, is there a question that you wish I had asked you that I have not yet asked you?
I don't think so. No, I think you covered it all, Lynn. And Marvin too.
Well,
One of the questions, the only other question I would have is, as you've traveled, and not only to Florida, but I'm sure elsewhere, a lot of people have said that growing up in Sullivan County is a special benefit, and that the culture, the very diverse culture in Sullivan, has been a plus as they interact with people from all over the world or all over the country. Did you find that? Do you find that your roots, as they say here, has been a benefit to you and in your travels and in your various business dealings?
Definitely so. You know, it's funny. We always say wherever we travel, whether it's Mexico, one of the islands, or, you know, in the United States, if you're interacting with people and talking and visiting in a bar, on the beach, wherever, everybody knows Sullivan County. And it's really funny how small the world truly is. And that I absolutely love. That's so special, really special. Yeah.
And I've had that experience myself. I was in Nassau when talking with people around a pool, and the person across the way heard us speaking, and 3 other people, and they all had a connection to Sullivan County.
Sure.
East, West, home is best. Okay.
I know. I love that.
Yeah. Well, Joyce, I want to thank you for taking time to speak to us today. We will be posting this soon on both the library site and on YouTube. And I think you've given hope for people, especially women who didn't go to college. They have the opportunity to do just about anything they want if they have enough drive. And that this area, as we all know, the beauty of this area is what keeps so many of us coming back here.
Yes,
and
for
so
sure.
we appreciate your taking time to talk with us today. Thanks,
Thank
Joyce.
you for having me. I appreciate that.
All right. Thanks, Marvin.
Thank you.
Take care.